I want to welcome you to men's breakfast. I'm sorry Colleen's not here today, but I'm going to introduce our speaker, Stephen Smith, the chairman of our Board of Selectmen, and he's going to speak and then take some questions.
So, it's really great to be here. You know, there's certain things living in Georgetown, especially if you are on the Board of Selectmen, that you kind of look forward to. And this is always something I wanted to come into the men's breakfast to participate in, so I'm actually excited to be here. I was telling a few people, I was in California as of 11 o'clock last night. I took a red eye and landed at 7 a.m. So if I'm a little punchy, or if I'm a little incoherent, don't take it personally.
Why didn't you bring some heat with you?
I should have, really.
How's the weather on the West Coast?
It was 60s. It was better, you know, no snow. That's really I was in the San Francisco area, so it really wasn't super warm, but there's no snow, which is
You know, with the rain?
nice break. What's that?
Had some bad rain and mudslides up there.
Yeah, they've had some rain. It's kind of gray. It doesn't rain much. It's only when I visit that it seems to rain, because my office is out there, so I go out just about every other week, and I seem to bring the rain, so they're not always happy to see me.
Just don't bring those fires.
Yes, yes. We could use a little melting though. I feel like it's going to be April before we see this snow go away. It seems to be pretty hard packed. All the kids are looking out, holding their baseball bats and baseball gloves, looking out the window, waiting for when it's going to start. So again, thank you for having me here. So I'm in my 5th year, ending my 5th year as selectman. Gary and I joined at the same time when we expanded from 3 to 5 selectmen. And I can honestly say I had no idea what I was getting into. I did a research, I talked to a lot of people, you know, a lot of people who had been selectmen or had served on boards. They counseled me. But you really don't know what's going on with the town until you get into it and see the challenges that are there and the things that have to be fixed or not fixed. There's been a lot of change in the last 5 years, and that involves, you know, I'm sure everyone knows, there's been sacrifices in terms of taxes and so forth, and new school buildings going in, and so it's been a tough trade-off, because I think, I don't want to speak for all the selectmen, but I think as a general rule, for, you know, we do this because we love Georgetown. We want, you know, new family, new couples and new people to come in and enjoy our town. We want people to be able to raise their families and have a good education. And also, equal importance, we want everyone to be able to retire here and enjoy it. And, you know, in particular, that's on my mind, you know, because again, we've just gone through some, what I think were much needed infrastructure changes. But I think we now have to look and make sure that the seniors who are here and the people who aren't seniors yet but will be seniors eventually don't get into a situation where they can't stay in Georgetown. Because to me that means we've failed. You know, we can't fix one problem and create another one. Although that typically happens, we have to amend that. So I think we really need to take a look at some of the potential ways we can help the seniors in town, specifically around property taxes. Because I think it's important to keep the whole cycle of life here happy and focused. In particular, what we have coming up this spring, you know, change is always in the air for discussion. One of the key things is that we're looking to potentially change the reporting structure of the town administrator. Right now in town hall, no one really reports to anyone. It's a very strange thing. So coming from the business world, you know, as I'm sure you all do, it's kind of strange to have no one report to anyone.
Washington D.C.
That's right, and look how well that works. So I think what we're saying is, okay, it works because we have some great people who really work hard together. And our group in town hall, I mean, the fiscal responsiveness, the fact that we've always been in the black when other towns were in big trouble, especially through the recession. We have some really talented people really dedicated to making sure that we stay healthy So, but the question is, as things change, you know, we need to change too. Doesn't mean we need to make dramatic changes, and it doesn't even mean we have to change. It means we should talk about it. And does this different structure make sense? So one of the key issues coming up will be, do we change slightly the responsibility of the town administrator? Because to change it dramatically requires a whole government change, which is a much longer process. And I will say that includes, you know, we're evaluating if the personnel board makes sense. And to that point, I just want to, you know, pay my respects. I'm sure a lot of you heard Chris Rich passed this week. Sad news. He's a guy who just gave a lot of time to the town in every event. You know, whether it was a school fundraiser, he was there. I don't even know how to really process it yet, because he was just very leader in the community, and he was very present. So I just want to, you know, take a second and pay my respects to him, and that's, you know, sad news.
It happened very, very quickly too, over a day or two.
It's one of the, I was traveling, and it's one of those things that, you know, you're going about your week, and, you know, certain things will happen, and certain things, I don't know, and I'm not as close to him as some of his friends, of course, but this was just really out of the blue. Hard, I can't really process it, I'll tell you the truth. It's just very sad. And he typifies a lot of the hardworking people that volunteer. You know, so we have a great town hall. We have a great number of volunteers that make this town work. And so part of that is always looking at the structure. When you have, it's interesting, when you have an elected group, you have a paid group, and you have appointed groups. Elected and appointed are volunteers. So we have usually other jobs that we're doing, so it's on a part-time basis, and then you have people on a full-time basis. Always balancing, that's a tough structure. You know, it's a tough structure to work with. A lot of great things have happened from it, and we want to keep looking at it, making sure we have it structured the right way, without making any dramatic changes or sudden changes. And we want to communicate to people about that. In the, I guess I'll call it the school trilogy, part 3, the high school is potentially going to come up for improvements this spring. So the MSBA is going to pay their 50% again. They're offered to paying half of it. There's things like fixing the roof. There's certain things that we have to do no matter what, because it's leaking. They have to fix the roof. The thing floods because of the way it sits on the hill and the way it was designed. So it's going to be another tough decision for people. And, you know, but that is coming up, and I'm sure it's going to be much debated as to is it because we're getting 50% from MSBA and we're doing some needed repairs, does it make sense to do it now? Or, I mean, there's been an override, there's been a new school, Pembroke, being built. So it's going to be a tough decision for the town to decide on the financial savings versus the benefits of, you know, really being done with fixing our school system. And then we have a lot of the other standard stuff coming up, just keeping the town running. Gary, am I missing any other majors that, trying to think. These sessions, as well, you know, go late, so we get a little punchy as we get down to the 20th article. But I think that's probably the two bigger ones that we're going to address.
Funding for Elm Street.
And then addressing funding for Elm Street. And I think we had the funding, right, already now, in terms of when we voted before we appropriated the funding.
Well, we have approval, but where we're gonna get it from is the.
Right,
Yeah,
where
we have to bond it.
where the funding comes from, yes. And also what the design is and all that piece of it too, so I'll be quiet after that. I just wanted to give you a little bit of background of what I see going on. I have some other thoughts I can share, but I'll stop for questions.
Without the state kicking in as much as they are, both for Pembroke and now you're saying the high school as well, what would the town do? I mean, you can't say no if someone's willing to say, I'll pay 50% of it. That 50% may not be there next year or the year after if you want to put this on the back burner and you know, put it off.
that is part of the challenge. So it's part of the benefit of getting that 50%. But the challenge is it's not, even with the 50%, it's not an insignificant amount.
Oh, it's a large amount.
Right. The high school is much smaller compared to the Pembroke renovation. But I think, I'm pretty conservative by nature, but you would know over the last 5 years over all the increases that have happened. So coming into this, I really didn't understand, and I spent a lot of time learning about our infrastructure. So whether it was the roof on our public safety building, or the roof on the highway department, or the state of some of the schools, I think if we, the group that we've been working with, a lot of what we've been trying to do is plan for the future and not get surprised. So we spent a lot of time trying to fix stuff right now that needs to be fixed in an organized fashion, and then plan for the future, which includes creating funds, like the Capital Improvement Fund, so that we start squirreling away little pockets of money, and then also start looking into the future as to, okay, what do we need next? What's going to happen 5 years from now? What's going to happen 10 years from now? Because if you don't, in essence what happens is what's happening now. Every 20 years, the group that happens to be living here gets saddled with a burden, right? Because every town needs revitalization from time to time, no matter what you do. There are times where buildings get old and things change. So I think we're trying to plan ahead, and then we're trying to also look at better maintenance. So Pembroke School is kind of an interesting design, in terms of the modern designs right now. It's an older kind of California design. But, if different maintenance practices were funded and happened there, would we have had an alternative to do an addition or something like that? So I think we want to really always be thinking into the future. When we're looking at labor issues, budgeting and increases, we're always trying to understand what are the long-term liabilities that we owe, that accrue in our labor contracts versus the wages we have today. And we're always trying to manage the long-term issues as best we can, because those are the surprises that really hurt, and those are the ones that can cost a lot of money to plan ahead.
Why do the people who build schools in the East use California designs? Most of the California designs don't deal with snow, and they need to
Right.
have pitched roofs, I would think.
Right. So I wasn't, I don't know, maybe some of you were there for the design process originally. There's some innovation. I mean, it's actually a nice design in terms of the daylight and the way, there's a lot to it. It's just that the snow creates this unusual burden where you have the gardens in the center, but then the snow can block the vents, and the vents are near the ground, right? So it's actually a very unique and nice design in a lot of ways. It's just that our snow, specifically, caused a lot of burden on that. And I think, we're looking now more, the Pembroke School is a traditional, it'll have some bends into it and stuff, but it's more of a traditional type construction of school, using, newer technologies. Other questions?
Why do you build a school purposely to fall apart in 20 years?
Well, I don't think that was the intent.
I come from Methuen, and there's a high school there that was built in early 1900, and it was still a high school into the 50s. Now it's used as a town hall. Never had to replace a roof. Never had to place a stairwell or anything.
As an architect, I can sort of answer that. Any of the older buildings that you see today, you can go back as far as the Brocklebank Museum, it's built in 1660, and it's still sitting there, and it's built well. And if you look at the structure and the timbers, they're 12, 14 inches square, and at the corners, they dovetailed them, and it was built to last. I'm not gonna say the crap that they built today. If you can get 40 or 50 years out of it, you're fortunate. I don't think the workmanship is there like it used to be, and you're not getting the same product.
And another interesting phenomenon is technology.
Yeah.
So you have to run a lot more wire than you used to. actually, we're in that middle phase where you have to run a lot of wire. It'll be wireless in 20 years or whenever it gets perfected. But that creates a whole new, so things like handicap standards are different
We didn't have those.
from back when the schools were built back then. It's tough to run wire through cinder block with, or when there's no passage in the ceiling. So I think some of it is, we're trying to plan ahead and do more traditional type, when I say traditional, more just straight up and down versus kind of a funky design type of construction. And also trying to plan ahead for technology, because that's the big curveball that I don't think anybody in the 70s could have really anticipated, the proliferation of that technology.
They're gonna do pitched roofs, they're supposed to be pitched roof in New England because of snow loads and all such things. There's a bit less leaking and less problems, they say. They say flat roofs are bad news.
Well, I mean, there are a lot of flat roofs in New England, so I think it'll be at the right pitch, so I'm not gonna, I honestly don't remember the latest in terms of what that roof looks like.
A
There are
flat
some-
roof actually pitches toward the drains, and there's a number of
Right.
drains on the roof. It's not as though it's completely flat, but
Right.
you're right. Ideally, you'd want a nice pitch on it.
Right, and the challenge with the pitch, as I understand it, can be snow falling. Right, so that's the reverse side. You tend to access a school, a house you kind of access from 1 or 2 points. A school can be accessed from a lot of different points. And then the students, they're not necessarily going to be aware of looking for snow. So, I do feel confident that a very professional team put a lot of due diligence and feedback on community meetings that I think we'll have a school we can be proud of, and that's going to stand for a long time and be able to be upgraded in 30 or 40 years versus, having to be replaced.
Trouble is with the contractors that build these schools, you could do a lousy job, you could even research them and say, well, I don't want this contractor, but you almost have to take them because the state never fires them. They're still allowed to do their building, even though every school I've ever worked in, I was a carpenter, every school I've ever worked in, they leaked before they even finished. The quality of the,
That's a really good point. So the MSBA, who we met with, one of the first things they said is, they say that they acknowledge that that's been a problem in the past, and they're trying to change that process. So they're assigning, I forget the specific name, but someone to steward the project and watch it through.
Clerk of the works.
Could be the clerk
yeah,
of the
the
works.
clerk of the works is 9 times out of 10 political.
Yes.
Well,
yes.
this is a specific, I forget the term, someone to oversee it from their side, third party, and then there's gonna be inspections, and the warranty process is important. Also, materials are better, now, longer lasting, but I would say that the MSBA brought that up as a very specific concern. It's a concern at the high school. Why are we dealing with flooding issues inside the high school right now? Ideally, when it was renovated, then those types of things should have been addressed. So I think that was definitely on everyone's mind, that we want to build it once, build it right. And then if there are issues, every building has issues, that the contractor, there's a holdback in terms of payment and also reputation, these things. But it's a good question.
No matter how bad a job they do, though, they're still allowed to come in on another contract later on, so.
Well,
Unless it's
we
action.
checked into their history, so
Give you a screen.
it's harder now to do, the communications gotten much smaller. So, I think they are very sensitive to the fact that if they don't do a good job, that it will impact them in the future, because people will call us and ask for a reference.
There's gonna be all sorts of interviews anyway with the architectural firm or engineering firm or whoever's involved.
Right.
So you can screen out that type of thing if they've previously had problems on other jobs, which is good.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, if I may, I don't think, anymore that you definitely have to take the lowest bidder if, like in the old days, if you can prove that there has been some problems with one of the companies that's bid, you're allowed to take a higher one, I believe.
Right, and so for professional services, the standards have changed where it's not necessarily low bid. where it's qualifications come into more.
Yeah.
And then when they put the bid out to the builders, then it is the lowest qualified bidder at that point.
I had heard that the best way, if you're building a house, you get 3 to 5 bids. Take 3 contractors within few, maybe even $1,000. You can take any one of those 3 and you'll be somewhere near right. But if you take one that's a real low bid, watch out. They're gonna get, he's gonna cut corners to make up for
Right.
it.
Well, the nice thing with public buildings like this or commercial buildings is that there's typically performance bonds and guarantees that have to go along with it. So there is a little more performance process when it is built. Because luckily, again, the budgeting process was done correctly and the lowest responsible bid was significantly lower than what we budgeted, which is what we had hoped for. Yes.
Have you done any studies on sewers?
Yeah,
I have not. So as a group, we have not.
please.
We,
60 years have gone by since I've been in town.
Thank you.
Back in the 60s. Sewage has been the number 1 question. In fact, if you go anywhere in town, go to the 4 or 5 shopping centers that we have now in town, you won't find a large restaurant. You've got a coffee house, you've got all the pizza parlors you won't imagine. They usually spend a year, 2 years, and then they're out the door and they could go. But that always has been a problem. Central sewer system that someone can tap into and bring in, whether it's a large industry or a nice restaurant or that sort of thing. I don't think it'll ever be solved.
it's, right. My understanding, there was a time years ago where there was potentially discussion of tying into Groveland.
They mentioned that, yeah.
Right. But so we really have 2 challenges. There's Georgetown as a whole, if we wanted to do sewer, would obviously be very expensive. But specifically the downtown is the challenge. So I think roughly we're still 92% residential tax base. That is, every time we do an improvement like a school or anything like that, we all feel it because it's such a high percentage of residential tax base here. And so the challenges we have, and I think we continue to focus efforts on bringing new businesses in, but it's still a challenge. Challenge 1 is our infrastructure. That it has to be suited where you really can't have a lot of wastewater requirements because that's not what we have right now. We don't have that ability right now. Unless you were to be off the town center and have a lot of space to build septic.
Couldn't there be an industrial park or 2 built that you could, I mean, look at Newburyport, and not that that should be the ideal situation, but that is a big part of they bring in funds for the rest of the city, and I think towns are doing that, Amesbury and
Right.
whatever.
Yes, because, so we were just coming out of the recent recession, the challenge was that there was a lot of vacant office parks. Because we had done a study, and office parks was one of the #1 opportunities because it brought new business in, which meant people using our restaurants and so forth. It was low water, low infrastructure use, and it obviously was not disruptive. It was not like a large chain store would have a lot of traffic into it. It was more. So that was looked at. I think it's a matter of someone willing to invest that here and do that. I think because again we have the infrastructure piece of it. We also have the how many customers do we have to actually go into the restaurant? We have a lot of movement in our restaurants and a lot of ownership changes. A lot of people come through Georgetown. It is not a lot to stop, and there's not even necessarily a lot of parking to stop in certain places on how that works. So, I think it's a hard problem to solve. I think we have to keep working at it, and because what a town can control, we can control our infrastructure, but that's expensive. We can control our tax rate, right? So why do businesses pick a spot? Either location, where their employees or where their customers are gonna be. Or it has the right infrastructure to support them. Or there's a tax or other type of financial advantage over going to a town next door. There's only so many levers we'd have to pull on this. We can't change our location. We don't think we want to. I don't want to. That's part of the beauty of Georgetown. But it's a puzzle that's gonna take a while to figure out. But I think we need to keep understanding it's important to us. Because it's not just getting business in, it's getting the right type of business in. That's part of this.
One small piece of it, of the puzzle, I happen to enjoy historic preservation from our historical commission and historical society. There are moves here and there to, tear down a piece of the town's history or great historic building. We went through that sort of this past Tuesday with the zoning board of appeals where they wanted to take a building down. The folks that own the Dunkin' Donuts Plaza area wanted to increase their sewer system, which is fine, and I guess they felt that parking was an issue and they wished they had more parking. To do that, they would scoop up the building, which incidentally is almost 200 years old. In fact, that whole string of buildings from where the Dunkin' Donuts is to the center of town, there's 7 buildings, and of the 7, 3 of them are over 200 years old. The other 3 or 4 are about 175 years old each. So it's a great part of the town's history, and right across the way, the town has spent $150,000 in Harry Murch Park, which is town common space, and has been there since 1810. So you've got, I hate to see anything that's gonna disrupt the town's history, or you start chipping away, and even though there are 2 banks on that same street, that section, the structure has remained the same, so physically, when you drive through, you see these great buildings.
Right.
I think the town has to make an effort to do what they can to hold on to this town's history, because once it's gone forever. You're gonna find industrial buildings or commercial shops right down East Main Street, right into town.
I agree. I mean, we have to remember, some of us may have been born here, others moved here, is why we love it here. So from my house, I can walk 5 minutes and there's a horse. And if I walk another 2 minutes, there's some goats and some chickens. And if you look around, we're surrounded by beautiful trees, and we have some great open space, and we have some great historical buildings. So, there's always new that comes in. That's part of growth in any town, but I think keeping that balance, keeping our history, is important. I have 12-year-old twin boys and an 8-year-old daughter, and we're driving past Town Hall, and there's a sign, with the home of Old Nancy. Tell me about Old Nancy, and so I think that's an important piece of what we have to remember, So I agree, and the balance, that's always tough, because everyone has different opinions on that, but I think everybody agrees that no one's looking to make this a metropolis, that we're here because we like the rural lifestyle, and the question is, as you say, things creep in over time.
People move here for a reason, and I think
Right.
it's, like you say, it's the atmosphere, it's the camaraderie, the coming into a village, so to speak,
Absolutely.
and not into a big urban city or something
Route
like that.
95 opened it up.
Yeah, yeah,
Back
that brought in more people.
I bought my house in North Street in 1952, and 95 only went as far as Boxford. They were
Okay.
working on the rest of it.
Well, even I grew up in Danvers, and I had a friend, junior in high school, who lived in Georgetown when I met, and I said, Georgetown, where? I was a kid, but I'm like, where? I've never even heard of that place,
Yeah.
Now it's next to Groveland. Where's that? So
Yeah.
it definitely, and as towns like Danvers, who, when I grew up, it wasn't quite like Georgetown, but there wasn't a mall. I was when the mall went in. And so that fills up, and so everybody takes one step to the right, one to the
Another
north,
law.
and you fill up, and then one step to the north, and really, I think that's where, at least in terms of the housing increase that we've seen here, is we're another step to the north. Now, luckily, we're close enough where we don't need them all, because 15 minutes in either direction, we can be in shopping. But that's what made us a prime target for growth, is that our rural atmosphere, but still close to the more dense populations.
What's our population now?
I believe we're about 8,500. Gary, does that sound right?
Yeah, somewhere just over 8.
Something like 8,500 with
that
like
mark,
5,500 to
We had
6,000
to go
voters
to
or something.
3 precincts when you got over 8,000,
Right.
so.
Back in
I think we were-
52, I think it was only 2,000 people.
Sexy bunch.
Yeah.
Do you get more done as 5 selectmen as opposed to 3? You
So,
still got the 3 to 2,
right.
it's still the odds are the same, whether you have 5 or 3.
So I think we can cover more area. We can be at more places. Gary does a great job. He's the best he attends a lot of other meetings and he keeps us informed on a lot of stuff as to what's going on out there. So I think it allows us to spread ourselves more and be in more places. But the selectmen, because it's an elected entity and we have the open meeting law rules, we don't really talk to each other. I'll see someone at a social event, maybe a quick email or a text that says, are you coming tonight, or there's a question. But it's kind of weird, because usually when you put a team together, you work together as a team. And we don't really, that's the strange thing about government, and there's good reason for it, because if you do collaborate, then people with bad intentions can do bad things. So there is a reason for the open law, and it makes sense. But it's a kind of an unusual environment that, I see Gary and everybody else every 2 weeks, unless there's an event or something else we go to, and I'll sit with Mike Farrell every week, as the chair, and get caught up on what we're doing and make sure that information is disseminated. But I think the 5 allows more people in the community to participate, which means more opinions on the board, and it allows us to be in more places at once. In terms of the decision-making process, like you said, 3 to 2, 2 to 1.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it changed that
It's still,
piece of it.
it's-
But it gives more experience, my background's more strategy. Dave is has done more financial. Gary grew up here and can bring the history to it and his background to it. So it also, the more people you have, the more background you can bring. Because that's the biggest danger, is if you get a micro focus, and don't have diversity of opinion, then that's when you can, I think, get into trouble. Having more opinions is better.
I think I agree to that. We've been doing enough team building things that and one of the first things they show you is they ask everybody, how long have you been at this, how long have you been at that? And then when you add all of those years together, the amount of education and knowledge that you have in the room is a phenomenal number. And I think that what Steve is saying, you do get that, brings great diversity and knowledge to the board.
I'm just gonna get one last plug in here for the historical end of it again. Don't realize how old the community is. We have 400 houses in town that are built before 1900, 1800. We have some 1700s and even a few 1600s. That the town was part of Rowley, that was incorporated in 1638, I believe it was. And when you think of when the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock, that's only 14, that was in 1620, that's only 14, 15 years later that Rowley became a town. This is, where we're standing right now is West Rowley for many, many years before Georgetown was incorporated in, I think it was 1828. So it's doing whatever we can to preserve our history and hold on to this. There's not many communities throughout the whole United States can look back and say that they've got 400 houses here that were built, 100, 200 years ago. So we've got to try to preserve whatever we have and not get rid of it.
I agree. Many, many years ago, I purchased one of the books that's available, you know, about our history, about the factories, and it was about the transition of the downtown and how the shoe business and different things that had happened in the antiques and that piece of it. You know, I just think it'd be interesting if we could somehow insert a curriculum into the school, you know, the history, American history at
Great
school,
idea.
where you pick a day or two, or, you know, 1 week of classes where we do the history of Georgetown. So I'm probably causing trouble for the
Great
school
idea.
committee now. But it, you know, it's the kind of thing where it is, when you go through your town and you have knowledge about it, it does change the way you look at things, really, when you can appreciate, when it's not just a house, you know, oh, that's the oldest house, or, you know, what that monument means, why is that monument there, that type of thing. So, again, I hope I'm not causing trouble, but I'll talk to
Yeah, see what they do. That's a great
the
idea.
school committee about it, just think about, hey,
Yeah.
just even if it's an hour, for our kids to learn about Georgetown, maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah, we work, the Historical Society works presently with the local school system, and each spring, we take about 150 to 200 kids in the, I think, 3rd and 4th grade, and kind of walk them through, and what's nice about it is they can come back later with their parents and actually be the teachers and say, gee, this was used for so-and-so, and this is what they did.
Is this the
200 years
Brocklebank?
at Brocklebank Museum.
Right, yeah, my kids have all done that.
Yeah,
And they all
that's
come home
terrific.
talking about it,
Yeah.
absolutely, I think that's a great thing.
But I think your idea of, you know, getting something with the school system or something that they could insert something, or it could be town-wide and have some of it. We used to have house tours, I don't think we've had them for a few years now, but
Okay.
where you could tour some of the older homes and appreciate what's
This
in
is,
it.
Art Rollins' houses, he claims his house is older than all of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he says it's before the one down the street, and that's 16 something.
Wow.
He says his is before that.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that the
We
one in the
do
corner
have,
across the street in West-
at the town library, we've done 52 houses on Elm Street, and see 90 plus a number that were done before, about 120 houses that are documented by historical folks that have been paid by the state and the community preservation funds. And there's like 3 or 4 pages of research on each of these houses, so
Yeah.
people do have an older house, go down to your local library, and I think you can get some choice information, and you can get that copy right there. You pay 15 cents a page or something to get the soft copy.
I have a question for Ed. Have you ever done any survey, and Earl, I'm sure, can testify to this, as to Georgetown had a reputation for many years also of being a great cabinet making and furniture making area. I mean, we had Rogers Chair Factory, we had Hills.
Spalding's, yeah.
Hills, we had
Hills,
Spalding's, there was
yeah,
another
yeah.
shop down on Elm Street,
That's
Keo
true.
Knowles, Old Pine Shop. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
for many years, we had
Yeah.
a lot of furniture building and cabinet making in town. I don't know how long it lasted, but then it just sort of dried up. I suppose Spalding's was the last one,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you know, before the
look into
antique
that.
shops came
Yeah,
in
yeah.
and turned over, I think that was where Georgetown was after the shoe industry
That's a
took off.
Good point.
It might make a good subject to
Yeah.
study.
Yeah, that's true. Because I know the shoe industry was enormous in town, hundreds and hundreds of employees here,
Oh, at one time, they
And,
wooden table.
yeah.
Skate factory.
yeah.
My
And they
grandmother
were-
worked there.
You'd ship the shoes off to New York and Philadelphia and the larger, they'd produce them here in these, what you call a 10-footer, where a farmer during the winter months, for instance, couldn't do any farming. So there'd be 4 fellows or so in this little 10 by 10 or 10 by 12 cubicle, and they'd be cranking these shoes out, and you'd go to the grocery store and you'd barter, actually. You'd get 2 dozen eggs for so many.
Pastor Boylan's got the real history on, as far as like the pilgrims
Yeah,
coming over.
yeah, yeah.
Well, he's been here and
Oh,
spoke twice.
yeah.
He's supposed to be putting a book out. I asked his wife, I says, is
No, he's still working on that.
Yeah.
Joe Knapp, I think, and him have been working on the ingredients of that. There will be a book published shortly. So. history, you gotta keep it alive here.
And that's a big difference, right, in Georgetown now, is that, you know, before my time, what you're talking about is people worked here. You know, and there was more of an industry here. Where now, people live here,
Yeah.
and they travel somewhere else to work.
That's right.
And that's different. And I'm not saying bad or good, but definitely different. There's certainly plenty of Georgetown pride, you know, in the school system for all the other organizations we have here, so I don't think we've lost the pride in our town. But it does change the dynamic when it's not work and live here, it's basically live here, you know? And that's just part of, I guess, you know, evolution, or not evolution, that means improvement, but change.
Yeah.
We also have the oldest active privately owned fire company still in business,
Yes.
Erie Four.
Yeah, Area 4.
Did you ever read the history on that?
I did, one of my first responsibilities when I joined Selectmen was to put together an actual contract. It was a casual agreement with the town, and we put together an actual contract so that, because some years they got paid and some years they didn't, and so just to try and make it fair, because it is a unique part of our town, it's an important part of our town, you know, in terms of safety. So another great example of, you know, how Georgetown is different, and how we struggle as we get bigger on how the way we did things, trying to make sure that they still work with the way we do things now. So absolutely. And, you know, then you go to the community suppers, or the pancake breakfast, the Kiwanis pancake, all that stuff, that's all part of, you know, trying to keep the community staying together.
I joined them on their 100th anniversary in 1954.
Did you really? The Kiwanis? Who'd you join? The
Erie
which-
Four.
Erie Four, oh, okay.
And it's 18 years of active duty on them.
Really? Wow. And, you know, yeah, that's, again, that goes to the great volunteerism we have in town. It's still today, it's a little harder, and I guess people have told me, you know, it's always been a little hard. More difficult, it's always been difficult to get volunteers, but we always get the volunteers, and,
You get the elderly folks versus the new blood, you know, like, that's the problems we have in the Historical Society or Commission or any of them.
right.
People, granted, they have to work full-time and, you know, and to try to split their time and go to some meetings or take part in activities that you may have to look at a historic building during the day, so,
Appointment.
you know, it's tough to get young people.
Right, and it's periods of time, so I lived here.
Tough to get old.
I don't do the math, but 10 years before I became active, you know, and I was focused on my kids and all the things that go with it, and there came a time where I was able to become active, so I think it's periods of time when people can do that.
Yeah, exactly.
See you guys later.
Any other things I can answer?
Great job.
Thank you guys. Again, really a privilege to be here, really appreciate the opportunity.